They found the body 3 days after the screaming stopped. But what they found with the body, that's what made this mansion curse forever. And I'm standing outside it right now. Before I show you what's inside, I need your help proving something. My mother said I'd never hit 200 subscribers telling stories like this. History tried to bury. Hit subscribe right now. And comment where you're watching from, because this case has connections in 47 states, maybe even yours. Here's what doesn't make sense. How does a woman die violently in a 60-room mansion, surrounded by 14 servants, 3 security guards, and family members, and nobody hears anything? How does the richest family in the state make the police report disappear within 72 hours? And why? In 2019, did someone break into this abandoned mansion and steal only one thing from the murder room? Let's just say there's a reason this family paid a fortune to make sure you never heard this name. Here's what nobody tells you about being the son of one of the richest men in America. Your name doesn't belong to you. Asa Griggs Candler Jr. Every syllable borrowed. Every letter a shadow. In 1919, when Buddie Candler walked away from the family meeting where they just sold Coca-Cola for $25 million, more money than most Georgians would see in 10 lifetimes, he wasn't celebrating. He was 39 years old, and he'd spent every one of those years being called Junior. So he did what any man drowning in his father's legend would do. He bought 42 acres in Druid Hills, the most fashionable address in Atlanta, hired the city's master architect, Charles Frazier, and told him something that would change everything. Make it bigger than my father's house. Make it bigger than my brother's house. But here's the thing about trying to build your way out of someone else's shadow. His father, Asa Sr., owned a mansion on Ponce de Leon Avenue. Elegant, respected. His older brother Howard had just finished Callenwold, right up Briarcliff Road. A Tudor masterpiece that newspapers called the finest home in the South. Buddie's plot sat between them, literally. So when construction began in 1920, Buddie didn't name it after himself. He named it after his car, the Lozier Briarcliff, a luxury automobile he'd raced the local speed records, the kind of machine that made headlines, the kind that said, "I'm here," without saying his father's name. The road got renamed too. Williams Mill Road became Briarcliff Road. The whole neighborhood would carry his chosen name, not the one he inherited. For 2 years, crews worked. Buff-colored brick shipped from New Jersey. Carved European marble for 10 fireplaces. Gold leaf applied to third-floor ballroom walls. $30,000 just for the tile work. That's $500,000 in today's money. The Atlanta Constitution was invited before it was even finished. They walked the formal gardens, photographed the lighted fountain, toured the greenhouses. They called it 40 acres of fairyland. But when you look at the blueprints, really look at them, you notice something Frazier built into the design. Secret doors in the ballroom. Separate staircases for family and staff. A third-floor vantage point where you could see everyone coming and going. Sightlines. Surveillance. Separation. This wasn't a home designed for comfort. This was a house designed for control. And in 1922, when the Candler family finally moved in, 6 children, 14 servants, 42 acres, Buddie Candler thought he'd finally done it. Thought he'd finally built something bigger than the name on his birth certificate. He had no idea what that house would cost him, because 7 years later, someone would die on these grounds. And the gun used? It had Buddie's name on it. When the servants walked the halls of Briarcliff in 1923, they carried cloth-wrapped shoes. Not because Buddie Candler demanded it, because in a house with over 40 rooms, you could hear a single footstep 3 floors away. And nobody wanted to be heard. Think about what 40 rooms means for a second. A dining hall that seated 75 people. Not a gathering, just Tuesday dinner if you invited the right crowd. A solarium with a fish pond built into the floor and oil paintings covering both end walls. 2 swimming pools. 1 private. 1 open to the public for a quarter. 25 cents to swim where Coca-Cola royalty swam. Neon fountain lit up at night, like a carnival. 14 servants to keep it running. 6 Candler children try and find their way through it. But here's what you need to understand about the Candler boys. Buddie's father and older brother both owned Aeolian organs. Ace's Briarcliff. So in 1925, 3 years after the house was finished, Buddie commissioned a $94,000 cathedral-sized Aeolian installed in a 1,700-square-foot music room. He'd just added to the mansion. $94,000 in 1925 money. That's nearly $2 million today. For an organ, it was the largest privately owned organ in Georgia. At the time, the 8th largest Aeolian had ever built for a private residence. The inauguration was broadcast over WSB radio, so everyone in Atlanta could hear it. His father heard it. His brother Howard, over at Callenwold, heard it. But here's the thing nobody talks about. You don't build a music room with a 3-story vaulted ceiling because you love music. You build it because you need people to look up. By 1927, rumors started in the Druid Hills neighborhood. Whole wings of the mansion sat empty, untouched. The library, hand-carved oak paneling imported from Europe, used maybe twice a year. The second solarium, built specifically for his daughter's wedding, gathering dust after the ceremony ended. 7 bedrooms, only 3 regularly occupied. Ask yourself this. Would you want to live in a house where your own children get lost looking for the kitchen? Where servants move through hidden staircases so you never have to see them working? Where the echoes are so loud that conversations 3 rooms away sound like they're happening in your head? Helen Candler was a leading socialite. Ace's Briarcliff, she threw parties that made the Atlanta Constitution. Magicians came, Howard Thurston, Dante. There were rumors Houdini himself visited, though that might have been another one of Buddie's stories. But between the parties, silence, the kind that presses against your chest. And then in 1932, Buddie did something that made even his own family question his judgment. He bought a traveling menagerie, 6 elephants. For lions, a Bengal tiger, a black leopard, a gorilla, baboons. He named the elephants Coca-Cola, refreshing and delicious, Wikipedia. And he marched them through the residential streets of Druid Hills, right past his neighbors' homes, to set up cages on his front lawn. His brother Walter, watching the parade, said it plain, "This is the biggest fool thing you've done yet." Why would a man who built a house so quiet you could hear a pin drop 3 floors away fill his front yard with roaring lions and trumpeting elephants? Because the silence was worse. And in 1935, it all came crashing down. A baboon escaped, jumped over the zoo wall, bit a neighbor, and devoured $60 in currency out of her purse. Ace's Briarcliff. She sued. Won $10,000. Ace's Briarcliff. Buddie donated the entire menagerie to Grant Park Zoo, the foundation of what's now Zoo Atlanta. Put his $94,000 organ up for sale. By the late 1930s, the Atlanta elite still came for the magic shows in the 3rd floor ballroom, still swam in the neon-lit pool, still marveled at the gold leaf ceilings and the carved marble fireplaces. But when the guests left, when the music stopped and the lights went out, 40 rooms, and most nights, only the servants walking those cloth-wrapped hallways. Buddie in his private balcony overlooking the music room, glass in hand, watching the emptiness below. He'd built the biggest house, the loudest organ, the most exotic zoo. He'd renamed the street, made headlines, outdone his brother. But in 1948, 26 years after the grand opening, Buddie Candler sold Briarcliff to the federal government, moved to the top floor of his hotel downtown, never came back. But the mansion wasn't done with the Candler name. Not yet. The world beyond Druid Hills was changing in ways Buddie Candler couldn't buy his way out of. October 1929. Black Tuesday. The stock market crashed. Banks failed across Georgia. Money dried up overnight. But in 1932, while Atlanta's unemployed stood in bread lines, only 48% of the city's workforce gainfully employed, Buddie Candler bought a traveling menagerie, 6 elephants. Coca-Cola, refreshing and delicious. For lions, a Bengal tiger, a black leopard, a gorilla, baboons. Estimated cost, $50,000, nearly $1 million today. He marched them through the residential streets of Druid Hills like a parade from another century, neighbors watching from their windows as Depression-era Atlanta tried to understand what they were seeing. His brother Walter said it plain, "This is the biggest fool thing you've done yet." But here's the thing about wealth that size. It doesn't just insulate you from reality. It replaces your judgment entirely. When your neighbors complain about lion roars at 3 a.m., you don't apologize. When they complain about the smell, you don't remove the zoo. You tell them it's good for Atlanta, good for the children, educational, until 1935, when a baboon jumped over the wall, bit a neighbor, and devoured $60 in currency out of her purse. She sued, won $10,000. Buddie donated the entire menagerie to Grant Park Zoo, the foundation of what's now Zoo Atlanta. The world outside Briarcliff was changing fast, and Buddie's money couldn't stop it anymore. The Candlers mostly weathered the storm of the Great Depression without compromising their luxurious lifestyles, but mostly is doing a lot of work in that sentence. Because while Buddie's father had built an empire on nickel sodas and Southern charm, Buddie had built his fortune on speculation, real estate deals, livestock ventures, movie theater investments that went sideways. And in 1929, the bills came due. His wife Helen died, just 40 years old, the woman who'd hosted high teas and garden parties, who made Briarcliff the social center of Atlanta, gone. 10 months later, he remarried Florence Stevenson, his secretary for 9 years. The Atlanta papers had a field day. Then in March 1929, his father, Asa Sr., passed away. Buddie was overseas when it happened. Egypt, the Mediterranean, running from something he couldn't name. The late 1930s were marred by numerous legal issues. Neighbors suing over the zoo, lawsuits stemming from real estate deals gone sour. In 1932, the Shrine Building Company won a judgment against him for $10,000, money he'd pledged for the Fox Theater construction, then refused to pay. His $94,000 organ went up for sale. The parties at Briarcliff grew quieter, smaller, less frequent. 10 of Asa Candler's 22 grandchildren became alcoholics. 6 died of their addiction. Buddie was one of the 10, an alcoholic for much of his life. The mansion that was supposed to prove he was more than his father's name had become something else entirely. A mausoleum for a marriage that ended too soon. A monument to excess in the city learning to live with less. A house too big to fill. By 1931, Buddie's extravagance had invited financial struggles. The zoo was hemorrhaging money, the lawsuits piling up, the organ gathering dust. And then, on the morning of January 18, 1931, his groundskeeper James Stark found a car parked near the putting green. 2 people inside, both dead. And the gun used? It belonged to Asa Candler Jr. Briarcliff entered the public record forever. José Cruz wasn't supposed to be at Briarcliff. Not permanently, anyway. Buddie met him in the Philippines, a magician performing tricks that made grown men question their own eyes. Buddie, obsessed with magic since 1925, asked Cruz to come to Atlanta, to work as his butler and teach him magic tricks, one of 15 servants at Briarcliff Mansion. But Cruz wasn't just a servant. He had his own apartment above the garage, access to the main house, the trust of a man who trusted almost no one. January 18, 1931. Dawn. Groundskeeper James Stark did his morning rounds. Spotted a car parked by the putting green on the southern edge of the 42-acre property. At first, he thought it belonged to an Emory College employee. Briarcliff's grounds were open to the school's faculty, but after walking the property, he realized no one was out there, so he approached the car. Inside, he found José Cruz, dead from a gunshot wound to the temple, with a young woman in his lap. She was dead from a gunshot wound to the abdomen. Her name was Gladys Frix, 19 years old. In shock, Stark ran to the house to wake Buddie and called the police. The police found a note in the car. It read, "To whom it may concern, we, Gladys Frix and José Cruz, are taking our lives because we love each other, but due to objections of Louise Frix and Mrs. J.T. Clay, we can't find a way to be together in peace." A double suicide, it seemed. 2 people who loved each other. forbidden by family, choosing death together. Except Gladys' name on the note was not in her handwriting. Investigators also found a pair of child slates in the back seat. One read, "This is my last trick, and I hope you enjoy the performance." The coroner's jury determined that the event was not a double suicide. José had killed himself and taken her with him. Murder-suicide. The magician's final performance. José Cruz, the man Buddie brought from the Philippines to teach him card tricks and sleight of hand. The man who had access to the house. To Buddie's belongings. To Buddie's nickel-plated pistol with an ivory grip. Buddie told investigators he owned the gun but didn't know Cruz had it or how long he'd possessed it. He was never implicated, never charged, but the damage was done. Gladys Frix, 19 years old, was buried January 20th, 1931, in Rose Hill Cemetery in Austell, Georgia. José's brother Philemon returned to the Philippines after the incident. Buddie provided a plain pine casket and had José buried at Westview Cemetery. The cemetery Buddie himself would spend the next decade redesigning, the place where he'd eventually be laid to rest. Although Buddie was not involved in the incident, he had trouble fighting off the negative attention and ended up distancing himself from his hobby, which was tainted for him by the double tragedy. The magic shows at Briarcliff stopped. The $94,000 organ went silent. The house that Buddie built to escape his father's shadow had become a place where two people died because love wasn't enough. And maybe that's the cruelest trick of all. You can build a mansion with 40 rooms. You can fill it with exotic animals and cathedral organs and 1,700-square-foot music rooms. You can rename streets and throw parties that make the newspapers. But you can't build your way out of grief. You can't buy your way out of tragedy. And you can't escape the fact that some mornings you wake up in a house too big to live in and realize you're still alone. Before we go further, I need to ask you something. If this story is making you feel something, anger, sadness, curiosity, hit that like button right now. Because channels like this that tell forgotten histories don't survive without you. And if 200 subscribers feels impossible to my mother, then maybe you can help prove that wrong. Now, February 15th, 1947, Buddie's oldest surviving son, John, walked into a clinic that promised to cure alcoholism. The treatment? Massive doses of insulin. Induce shock. Purge the addiction from the body. John never walked back out. He died of insulin shock at 42 years old. 10 of Asa Candler's 22 grandchildren became alcoholics. 6 died of their addiction. John was the first of Buddie's children. The house that was supposed to outlast everything. The 40 rooms, the cathedral organ, the zoo, the magic shows, couldn't save a single one of them. And 1 year later, in 1948, Buddie signed the papers. Sold Briarcliff to the General Services Administration. They told him it would become a veterans hospital. $9 million of construction planned. Nurses' residences. Modern facilities. It never happened. He moved into the penthouse of the Briarcliff Hotel, the building he developed in 1924 at the corner of Ponce de Leon and North Highland. From 42 acres to a hotel suite, from a mansion with 1,700-square-foot music rooms to a few rented rooms overlooking Virginia Highland. He'd built the hotel, put his name on it, thought it would be another monument. Now it was the only place left that would take his name. 1035 to 1055. Closing loop number 2. The hotel answer. His wife Florence was with him. The former secretary he'd married 10 months after Helen died. The woman the Atlanta papers had whispered about for years. They lived quietly. No parties. No elephants. No magicians. Just Buddie, Florence, and the echoes of what used to be. And in 1949, morbidly obese and aging rapidly, he took his grandson Asa V on one final African safari. One last hunt. One last adventure before his body gave out completely. January 11th, 1953. Asa Griggs Candler, Jr. died of liver cancer in that hotel penthouse. 72 years old. The man who'd renamed streets and built the biggest house and installed the loudest organ was buried at Westview Cemetery, the same cemetery he'd spent 20 years redesigning. The same place he'd buried José Cruz 22 years earlier. His estate was estimated at $2 million, a fraction of what he'd once owned. His brother Howard, The brother whose house he'd tried to outdo, the brother he'd sued, the brother he might not have spoken to in years, was one of his pallbearers. He built Briarcliff to outlast himself. Instead, it outlasted his control. And the house? The house was just getting started. The same year Buddie died. The Georgian Clinic opened its doors at Briarcliff Mansion, Georgia's first residential alcohol treatment facility. The irony was so heavy it hurt. The ballroom where Buddie had thrown magic shows for Atlanta's elite, now group therapy sessions for men fighting the same demon that had killed his son. The music room with the $94,000 organ, now counseling offices. The solarium with the fish pond, now a common area for patients in recovery. If you're still watching, drop a comment right now and tell me where you're from. I want to see how far this story reaches. And if you ever known someone who fought addiction, or fought it yourself, this next part is going to hit different. The state of Georgia carved Buddie's mansion into something functional. Bedrooms became patient rooms. Hallways became walking routes for group sessions. The third-floor ballroom, the place where Howard Thurston had performed illusions, where Houdini might have visited, became a space for men to confront the illusions they'd been living under. The Georgian Clinic ran through the late 1950s. And then, in 1965, the state and Emory University partnered on something bigger, the Georgia Mental Health Institute, GMHI. They built a massive brutalist structure just south of the mansion. 5 stories of raw concrete, angular, cold, institutional. 141 beds for psychiatric patients. Underground tunnels connecting the new building to the mansion, to the cottages where patients stayed, so they could move between facilities without ever seeing daylight. The mansion itself became outpatient treatment. The DeKalb Addiction Center operated from Buddie's former home through the 1980s. Think about the visual for a second. Gold leaf ceilings, carved European marble fireplaces, hand-carved oak paneling imported for a library no one used. All of it repurposed for people who couldn't afford private care. The wealthiest man's monument to excess, literally feeding people recovery, housing people in crisis, treating people the system had forgotten. Buddie had spent $50,000 on elephants. The state spent $12 million building GMHI to help people Buddie would have never noticed. But those tunnels, the underground network connecting the cottages to the main psychiatric building to mansion, patients walked those tunnels for 32 years. Staff moved through them. Doctors, nurses, orderlies. And in the dark, in the cold concrete passageways beneath Briarcliff's manicured lawns, people whispered about voices in empty wings, about doors that open on their own, about shadows in the music room. GMHI closed. Budget cuts. $24.5 million a year to operate. The state couldn't sustain it. Emory University bought the 42-acre campus for $2.9 million. They had plans. A biotech research center. A second campus. None of it happened. The mansion sat empty. The brutalist hospital sat empty. The tunnels sat empty. And the house that had been built for control, that had witnessed a murder-suicide, that had become a place of healing, was about to become something else entirely. Emory owned it, had grand plans for it. But year after year, nothing happened. The faculty didn't want to leave the main campus. The biotech center never materialized. In 2011, 3 GMHI buildings at the rear of the property were demolished. The rest just sat there. Windows boarded up, doors chained, tunnels sealed. And then Atlanta's film industry exploded. Real quick, if you think forgotten places like this deserve to be remembered, subscribe right now. Because we're about to talk about how this mansion went from a family's private shame to the most famous psychiatric hospital in the world. And you've probably seen it. 2 brothers from North Carolina named Matt and Ross Duffer were scouting locations for a new Netflix series. They needed a building that looked clinical, institutional, unsettling, a place that could pass for a covert government laboratory conducting experiments on children. They found the Georgia Mental Health Institute. Building A, the 5-story brutalist structure with the underground tunnels. They renamed it Hawkins National Laboratory. And Stranger Things turned Briarcliff into a global icon. The Vampire Diaries filmed there. Doom Patrol filmed there. Ozark filmed there. The The mansion that Buddie built to prove he was more than his father's name. The house that witnessed Jose and Gladys die for love. That became an alcohol treatment center where his own legacy of addiction was treated, stopped being lived in, and started being watched. Millions of people streaming, binge-watching, obsessing over 11, and the Upside Down and the Demogorgon. Never knowing they were watching Buddie Candler's land. Emory University announced they were tearing it down. Building A, the psychiatric hospital, Hawkins Lab, demolished to make way for Corso Druid Hills, a 500-unit senior living community. The mansion, they're restoring it. Event space, weddings, corporate gatherings. Full circle, in a way. Back to parties. Back to people informal. We're walking those halls. But there's one thing they can't restore. One thing they can't erase. The history soaked into those walls. The deaths. The treatments. The addictions. The fame. And in 2025, as demolition crews started tearing down Building A, people reported hearing things in the mansion next door. Footsteps in empty rooms. Organ music where no organ exists anymore. Voices asking for help in languages no one alive still speaks. The house Buddie built to control everything has become the one thing no one can control. And it's still not done with us. Here's the thing that should be impossible. A mansion built in 1922 by a man trying to escape his father's name. A place where two people died for love. A private zoo that bankrupted its owner. An alcohol treatment center built on the ashes of a family destroyed by addiction. A psychiatric hospital that became Hawkins Lab and made millions forget it was ever real. And in 2025, after 103 years, it's still here. If you made it this far, I need you to do something for me right now. Hit subscribe. Smash that like button. Because my mother said nobody cares about forgotten history. That 200 subscribers is a fantasy, and every single one of you watching proves her wrong. Building A, Hawkins National Laboratory, demolished to make way for Corso Druid Hills. 500 units of senior living, independent apartments, memory care, the final irony. The mansion, listed on the National Register of Historic Places since August 1988, protected, restored to its original 1922 design. Every post-1950s addition stripped away. Gold leaf ballroom, carved oak library, the music room where a $94,000 organ once played. All of it coming back. Buddie built Briarcliff to outlast his father's legacy. He failed. But the house? The house outlasted them all. And when the restoration finishes, when weddings fill the ballroom, when events pack the music room, when people walk those 40 rooms again, they'll be walking through a century of ghosts. Jose and Gladys in the car by the putting green. John Candler dying of insulin shock. Buddie alone in his hotel suite, staring at what he'd lost. The patients in the tunnels. The actors pretending it was Hawkins Lab. Drop a comment right now. Tell me where you're watching from. Tell me if you've heard this story before. Share this video with someone who loves true crime, abandoned places, or American history. Because stories like this don't survive without you. Briarcliff was never destroyed. It was transformed again and again by the people who inherited its weight. And 100 years later, it's still transforming, still refusing to disappear. Just like the people who died there, just like the secrets buried in its walls. The mansion always wins.